Welcome back to Mythic for Foundry. In the last video, we set up our actor sheet for the Master Chief, but we left him without any equipment. Let's fix that. First, let's give Chief the abilities we tabled in the previous episode. We owe him the Emotionally Broken and Fast Foot abilities, along with all Spartan 2 augmentation traits and the Squad Up racial ability from his Spartan 2 soldier type. We committed to purchasing the Blur ability last video, and we also owe him the Resilient and Gather Senses abilities, as well as another ability of equal or lesser value to Fast Foot, from his Point Man specialization. I selected Quick Draw. In the Items tab, on the right-hand sidebar, we're going to select Create Item. There are 5 different item types in Mythic for Foundry. The Ability item is for abilities, racial abilities, traits, and augmentations. The Armor item is for protective gear. The Education item is for making custom educations to roll from the Skills and Educations page. The Equipment item is a catch-all for any non-weapon, non-armor gear items. Finally, the Weapon item is for all damage-dealing weapons, even unarmed melee attacks. We'll start by making an ability. Let's make Fast Foot, since we already checked that box in the settings page. Here, we can see an image that we can customize ourselves to represent the ability and the name. Beneath that is the summary of what the ability does, then a table containing the prerequisites to select the ability, the experience cost to purchase the ability, and the type of ability, whether it's an ability proper, a racial ability, a trait, or an augmentation. Finally, beneath that is a rich text edit field, where we can put the ability right up. I'll fill this out with the Fast Foot information from the book. Now that this is filled out, we can add it to Chief's character sheet. To do that, we'll head to the Talents page and the Abilities and Traits tab. Then, we can click and drag the Fast Foot ability from the sidebar onto the sheet. We should see it appear here in 3 columns: the ability name, that summary we wrote earlier, and the experience cost. By clicking this edit icon, we can bring up the item sheet, allowing us to edit the document. Please note that editing the original that we dragged in will not update this version, as any items owned by an actor in Foundry are duplicate copies unique to the actor. In fact, we can even delete this Fast Foot that we originally made without impacting the one on Chief's sheet at all. If you were to want to delete an item from an actor's sheet, simply click the delete icon here. That's about all there is to ability item types. I'll go ahead and add all of the Chief's abilities to his sheet now. Now that we've added all of Chief's abilities, I'm going to take a quick detour to spend some more of his experience. We started with 16,000 experience, and Chief spent 11,600 to become a Spartan 2, and another 2,250 to get some Mjolnir Gen 2 armor. He also spent 500 for the Blur ability, which I'll add now. That leaves us with 1,650 experience to spend. I'm going to use some of that now to buy Chief an education, so we can see how to work with those. Looking over the list of educations, I picked Human Military. We're going to buy the +5 training in this education, and then the +10. Now, we can head to the Items section of the right-hand sidebar, and create a new item. We'll put in the name Human Military, and then select Education as its type. Now, we can start putting in some information about our education. We can, again, select an image to represent it. We can also select its difficulty and type under the Details section. Human Military is an advanced education, and is of the military type. Next is our experience cost. The +5 costs 400 experience. The +10 tier costs 600. Finally, we'll select our applicable skills. The book says we can use Human Military with the Command, Appeal, Investigation, Deception, Interrogation, and Security skills, so I've checked all of those. Now, we can add it to Chief's sheet in the same way that we did with the abilities, by clicking and dragging it directly onto the sheet. Under the Skills and Educations tab on the Talents page, we can scroll down to the very bottom to see our education. Much like the skills, we can roll it using the button on the right. Currently, it's disabled because we haven't selected a level of training. We can set the training to +10, since we paid for that tier. Whenever we go to roll the education, we can select the skill we want to use it with, or intelligence if we're just using it raw. It will take the roll value from that skill and modify it with the education to get our new total. Now, let's make an equipment item. These are the simplest of the actual physical items. I'll make something simple, like a helmet recorder. Another image we can select, and the name. Here, we have a faction drop-down, our price each, our weight each, and a checkbox for whether or not the equipment supports its own weight, like powered armors and the M6634 flamethrower. Under the table is another rich text editor to write up the rules and abilities of the piece of equipment. Now, we can drag it onto the Chief's character sheet, where it will appear in the inventory page. Much like other items on the sheet, we have the option to edit or delete it using these icons. We then have 3 checkboxes. The carried checkbox denotes whether this piece of gear is being carried on your person's character. Checking this will apply its weight to your carry weight. You must be carrying an item in order to equip it. The equipped checkbox denotes whether this piece of gear is being actively used. It's meant for weapons, to make them appear on the summary page, and for armor. Note that you can only have one armor equipped at a time. Equipping a second armor will unequip the first. The self-supporting checkbox denotes whether this piece of gear supports its own weight, like powered armors. Checking it will keep it equipped, but remove its weight from your felt weight. Then, there's the quantity input, which allows you to mark how many of that item you currently have on you. For thrown weapons like grenades, this is also tied directly to your magazine, which we'll see in a moment.
I need a weapon.
Yes. It's time to give the Chief some weapons. Let's start with the classic, an MA5C assault rifle. We have our image and our name, and then a list of basic weapon details. The nickname is how the weapon will appear on the summary page. We'll put assault rifle. Faction and faction training are slightly different, but both appear on the weapon as well as the armor items. This text field faction is for whichever group the weapon belongs to. This could be the UNSC or Insurrectionists, Covenant or Banished, or any other faction that may be unique to your game. The faction training, however, is for whichever training you need to have in order to use this weapon effectively. In that same regard, we have the equipment training for the weapon as well. Lastly, we have the type and the ammunition the weapon is using. Next are weapon tags. Pretty straightforward, just check the ones the weapon has. All weapons come with the UD or Universal Damage tag checked by default. The assault rifle also has the I or Insurrectionist tag and the TH or two-handed tag. We can enter fire modes here. Any with a value greater than 0 in its input field will show up on the summary page. Keep in mind, not all weapons will have a fire mode, and that's okay. Next is the core weapon stats. First, our weapon group. This dropdown offers ranged, melee, and thrown as weapon groups. I'll show you how each changes some of the other fields. Since the assault rifle is a ranged weapon, let's start with ranged. The damage roll is the core damage dice for the weapon. The base damage is the flat damage dealt. Piercing is the weapon's pierce. The 2-hit bonus comes from any modifications that apply to attack rolls based on the unique features or physical modifications to the weapon itself. You don't need to put in bonuses or penalties for fire modes or insufficient training. The system will calculate that automatically. Next is the weapon range, which has the lower and higher end of the optimal range as inputs. Magazine is how many rounds the weapon holds before needing to reload. Base reload is how many half actions are required to reload the weapon, before reductions from characteristics or abilities. The system will also calculate the final reload for you, so you don't need to consider that here. Finally, the price and weight of your weapon. The text field under this table is for you to put in some helpful information about the weapon, like its finish, what modifications it has, and any conditional modifiers to apply when the situation arises. Finally, we have the weapon special rules. For whatever special rules a weapon may have, we can check the box to apply them. Some special rules also have an input field, in the event that the special rule has numerical values it needs to use. For any that can be applied to the weapon's stats, they will, such as blast and kill, dice minimum, and cauterize if using the exploding dice alternate rule. Flame and Needle will also be rolled on any attack with weapons that have them, which we'll see in the next video regarding combat. Now, we can drag the weapon onto the sheet and mark it as both carried and equipped. If we head back to the summary page, we can see now that the equipped assault rifle is appearing in the weapon summary, where before there was nothing. Let's make another weapon, but this time a melee weapon. We're going to say that Chief picked up an energy sword somewhere on his journey, and that's what he's been carrying around. I've already entered all the basic details above, so let's see what changes for a melee weapon. We can see that 3 fields changed: the base damage, the piercing, and the range fields. Base damage will now ask for the base damage, plus how much of the wielder's strength modifier is applied to damage, which we can select using this dropdown. The options are none, 1/2 strength, full strength, and double strength. Energy swords apply half the user's strength modifier to damage, so we'll check that here. Piercing works much the same. We have the base pierce, plus the user's strength. Energy swords receive the user's entire strength bonus to pierce. Lastly, instead of having a complete range of ranges, we have instead a range bonus. This is the range bonus, if any, offered by the weapon. You don't have to add the range bonus granted by the wielder's size. That is also calculated by the sheet. We'll just add the +1 the energy sword receives, then move on to thrown weapons. Now, let's add the UNSC's workhorse explosive, the M9 grenade. Here, only one field has changed. Instead of range, which is calculated by the sheet based on the user's strength, we have a grip drop-down. In some cases, your GM may rule that you don't have a great grip on a thrown weapon, which can affect how far you can throw it. It's set to solid by default, but in the event that it needs to change, you can click the edit icon from the sheet to edit it. For grenades and other thrown weapons, the magazine is not the number of rounds in a magazine or clip, but rather how many you're carrying. For the Chief, I've set this to 2. Additionally, the M9 grenade has 2 special rules, the blast and kill special rules, so we can set the blast to checked and the number to 8. We can do the same for kill by checking it and setting it to 2. Now Chief has some weapons, but in order to cover
my ass,
we're also going to need some armor. So let's create a new item using our last uncovered type, armor. We're going to use a set of Gen 2 Mjolnir, since it's the most involved armor in the game currently. As you can see, the sheet reflects this, being currently the only item sheet with tab navigation. The basic info tab covers most of the mechanical data for the armor, including how much armor and shield it provides, and its alterations to wearer characteristics, if any. The details page is a rich text editor, where you can enter the armor's write-up, with a table already included for special abilities. The variant page is another rich text editor, to write in details about a particular armor variant you might be using. The modifications page is where you can keep track of permutations, armor abilities, and other modifications to an armor set. It has a table to note how many hard points are taken up by permutations, as well as another rich text editor to write them all down. Finally, another rich text editor in the notes section allows you to write down any information that doesn't fit into the other categories. Back on the basic info page, we have fields for the armor variant, the armor's price, and the material the armor is made from. We also have 3 checkboxes. The self-supporting box tells us if the armor carries its own weight. Mjolnir does, so we'll check it. Shields tells us if the armor provides energy shields. Mjolnir does, so we'll check it. We can see that the check state for this checkbox toggles the existence of this shields table, which marks all of the values for us. Characteristics is like shields, but it toggles the existence of a table to keep track of characteristic changes. We'll leave it checked too. The armor locations, shields, and characteristics tables are all laid out like the characteristics tables from the settings page in the actor sheet. We can enter the values for each column based on their source, so we know where everything we're getting is coming from. Don't be alarmed that the totals aren't being calculated. This is a known bug, one which I hope to remedy in an update very soon, so it's very possible that you might even be watching this video after it's been fixed. in which case all the better. Just know that if it isn't calculating for you, it will once we add it to the character sheet. After you have entered all of the information for your armor, we can drag it onto Chief's character sheet and equip it. If we open it with the edit icon again, you can see that the values are all being calculated. Let's check the sheet to see the effects. On the settings page, we can see the equipment fields in the characteristics and mythic characteristics sections are now populated and contributing to the total. On the summary page, we can see the impact it had on our characteristics, and in turn, our movement, carrying capacity, and other relevant stats. We can also see that the armor and shield tables are showing their final values, so we can now set Chief's current shields to fully charged. That's it for this video. We covered a lot, but now you should be familiar with all of the different item types in the Mythic for Foundry system. Spend the rest of your experience and credits, and get ready to finish this fight as we move on to combat in the next video. See you then.